in Lee Krasner and Jackson Pollock's barn studio in the Springs, East Hampton. And today I'm going to discuss with you, to begin with, how Lee Krasner's physical challenges, how she adapted, and also how that also led to some groundbreaking art. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little screen share. Then I'll tour you around the barn studio where Lee created her artworks. And then I will share with you some of the other artists, and Matt is expected to come on today. So this is where I'm sitting right now in Jackson Pollock and Lee Krasner's barn studio. Pollock, of course, was in this barn creating his famous drip paintings. Lee was in a little room upstairs in the house. After, she also painted in a little garage type building. But after Pollock died in 1956, Lee came into the studio and used it as her own. So here she is pictured with her artworks in the background. Now, of course, sometimes, not always, but sometimes as people age, you might run into some physical problems and physical challenges. So in 1962, while Lee was at a dinner party, she suffered a brain hemorrhage. She had surgery to remove the aneurysm, and she rested in this city all winter. Then she came back to the Springs, and in the summer of 1963, she was having dizzy spells. And she actually fell on the street in Main Street, and she broke her right arm. Now, this would be devastating to an artist because the right arm is what she painted with. And of course, she was eager to get back to her work. So what did she do? She actually used the fingers in her right hand that she could move. She used it to guide her left hand so that she could paint. Now, how did this affect her painting? As you could see in this one, she almost did like a stippling technique where you take the paintbrush and you sort of just dot it and push it against the canvas, making tiny little strokes. So before the accident, she used to make very broad strokes, okay? So I think this is really impressive because I honestly, if it was me, I might just say, well, I'll just rest. But she didn't do that. She invented a new way of painting that gave rise to these beautiful all over paintings. Now, later on in her life, Lee developed arthritis, and she had been an action painter where her painting was really filled with movement, where she was using her entire body. That's really hard to do if you're in pain and you have arthritis and you're on your feet. It's a very physical type of painting. So what did she do? Well, she had already developed this technique where she cut up her old paintings, and then she tore them up, and then she would glue them to a surface and rework them, doing dripping and brush strokes, and sometimes weaving in the collage element with the painting. Now, how did she do this if she had arthritis? She actually put the paintings or the drawings on a table so that she could walk around the table and she could work flat, on the tabletop, but still make artworks that were quite large, okay? So these are examples of adaptations. So just for fun, I want to show you the studio where Pollock and Krasner worked, and then we'll resume the presentation, okay? So I'm in the barn studio here. And this first room was used for storage. And here we see Lee Krasner's cart, because she was the last person, final person working in here after Pollock's death. Lee died in 1984. Here you see her pigments, her mosaic pieces. Lee also made a really amazing mural that's still up, a mosaic piece in New York City during her lifetime. That's a monumental piece. So here's Pollock's famous drip painting floor, okay? And we're not going to focus on Pollock today. We're going to focus on Lee. So here's the famous photo of Lee in the barn studio here. And as I said, she originally tacked all the paintings to the wall. And when you come in here, you can see her drips and her splatters where accidentally went over the edge of the canvas. And as I said, she was an action painter. Do you see her here using her entire body? So this is a really, you might say it's a youthful, almost dance-like athletic type of painting, okay? But Lee, in her older years, she figured out a way to get that range of movement in her artworks, even though her range of movement was declining. And I think it's really interesting, if you're really creative, if you, for yourself as an adult, or if you work with students and their range of motion is limited, you can find tools, even drip painting itself, the flinging of the paint. It's a way of extending someone's movement if they themselves, he or she, the movement is limited. Does that make sense? And there's all sorts of creative ways we could do this. You could use a roller, you could put paint on a wheelchair and roll it around and you'll get the I'm not saying to mess up a wheelchair, but you will get the tire marks, which some artists do that. So, okay, now I'm going to share with you some of my favorite artists who are considered some of the most important artists in modern art. And they happen to have some physical challenges. In some cases, the physical challenge actually sparked creativity. And it's a really interesting question. How do you explain someone's artwork? Let's say they have a visual impairment and you're explaining the artwork. Well, if the painting colors grew out of the visual impairment, does that mean it was done by default? Does it make it less worthy? Okay. I've noticed sometimes art historians and academics, they shy away from talking about that aspect of an artist's work. And I'll show you what I mean right now, specifically. And of course, that's not always, but that's a sometimes. So let's start with Degas. Here's a portrait of Degas. And as you can see, he's wearing spectacles. Degas had a visual impairment problem. I think from the time he was like 50 years old, he was very young when his eyes started to decline. Of course, Degas is one of the most famous impressionists. And this is interesting. You'll see in Degas' early work that he's actually painting subjects about sight, right? So you see the young woman with the field glasses, which led to his painting of a woman at the opera. You see Mary Cassatt on the right with the book really close up reading. And it's interesting that many of these impressionist painters did suffer from visual impairment, including Mary Cassatt. Now, this is one of Degas' iconic ballerina paintings where he's going indoors and he's painting the ballerinas at the rehearsal behind the scenes. And you could see that it's influenced by photography, the way it's cropped. And sometimes Degas plays with this idea of focus and out of focus, where the figures in the background are somewhat in focus, and it's almost as if the lens of a camera is making the figures in the background more in focus. And of course, he's capturing, as an impressionist, a moment in time. The ballerina might be yawning or dancing or scratching her back. So it's a very spontaneous, fleeting moment, okay? Now, why did Degas go indoors? Was it strictly an artistic choice? Because most of the impressionist painters painted in plein air, outdoors, right? So it is believed, some people believe that Degas painted indoors because his sight was failing and he couldn't paint outdoors anymore. The light affected his eyes. So as you can see in his later work here, what happens? This is painted with a lot of precision. This one is much rougher, right? It's more of a blurred image. And the color also becomes more saturated. And this is thought to believed to be a direct result of his declining eyesight. Now, this actually leads to a more modern way of painting, where you see the artist's mark, like in the abstract expressionists, like Lee and Pollock, and the color becomes free. But here you have an early Degas of one of his bathers, or a woman combing her hair. And here you have a later Degas, and you can see again how it becomes much more abstract. Here you have a later Degas where the color is so saturated. So perhaps he is straining to see the color. So in order to see it, he has to make it really much brighter and much, much stronger. But there's an expressive quality to the painting. And this is the beginning of modern art. Make sense so far? Now, there's many, many aspects to Degas' work. We're not going to get into that today. There's much controversy about the women he was painting. There's a lot to talk about, but we're just touching upon some of these issues. So these are Degas' sculptures, which were, it was primarily used as a tool for seeing. So when you're using your tactile quality and you're working in and around a figure to create a sculpture, you're using another sense, right? You're using your sense of touch to really understand the movement of the figure and the form. Degas, I believe when he died, there were 150 of these small sculptures made in wax. At that point during his lifetime, they were not cast in bronze. It was later on that these sculptures were cast, and now you can find them in museums all over the world. So here we have Monet, of course, another famous Impressionist painting, in the garden at Giverny. So these are different photographs of the Japanese bridge, and it shows it in different light and different seasons. And of course, what is Monet interested in? Monet spent his life painting light and color, and sometimes painting the same object, like haystacks, in different light. So you can imagine how devastating that would be to an artist, where you spent your whole life going outdoors into the landscape, painting light and color, and you begin to lose your ability to see color and to see light. Now, at that time, it was recommended, this is one of Monet's early works of the Japanese footbridge, where his sight was intact. This is the Japanese footbridge later on. So what has happened here? This is a beautiful painting. This is so expressive. It's becoming more abstract. You can see the loose brush strokes. And why is it that reddish tone, that reddish brown tone? Well, apparently, as I said, Monet had cataracts. And at that time, the surgery was considered really risky, and it was a very difficult surgery. So he didn't want to have the surgery. So when you have cataracts, your vision is blurred, and you tend to see more reddish brown tones. But this is interesting. This kind of painting that Monet is doing here, you can see how it's related to the later artists like Jackson Pollock, where it becomes more of an all-over composition going right off the edge, and the brush strokes begin to dominate. So there's actually a freedom here. Now, years later, here's another example of a Japanese bridge done later in Monet's life. Monet did have the cataract surgery in one eye. And apparently, I forget which was which, I guess the right eye, he could see ultraviolet rays, which most people can't see. But in the left eye, it was still the cataract eye. So sometimes he would close that eye to only see from the right eye. But his vision, he was really very seriously challenged. He even had to label all of his paints so that he could tell which color was which. The remarkable thing about Monet, he is a human being and he did suffer from depression. He was in his older years. He had lost his second wife and his son. He was losing his eyesight. He was struggling. And his friend, who was the government, a government official, and I can't remember the name right now. But anyway, he really, encouraged Monet to go back to painting. And it was in Monet's later years that he created his famous water lilies. And you can see here that purplish bluish tone. Was that because this operation led him to see ultraviolet rays? Now, what else is happening with these water lilies? It's outstanding. They're huge. These are monumental paintings. It's almost as if this is like the first art installation where you go into the room and the paintings just completely envelop you. Now, how is this related to Jackson Pollock and the abstract expressionists and Lee Krasner? Well, you can see in these paintings, there's no horizon. The view of the water lilies goes right off the edge, right? And also the brush strokes become much looser and the texture of the paint becomes much more prominent and the painting becomes much more abstract. And my own observation was these water lilies, like Pollock, it's like you're looking down into the pond, but you're also seeing the reflection from above, from the sky and the light. And Pollock's paintings sometimes have that quality also, where it's an aerial view, but yet you're looking down, but that's an aside. So I think that this is amazing how this elderly man basically came out of his depression to create these water lilies, which are considered some of the most important works in the history of art. And the sheer scale is just astounding. This is Matisse, of course, doing his famous cutouts, and his assistant is by his side. Now, Matisse had cancer and it led him to become bedridden. And he developed this technique called drawing with scissors, where he would cut into painted papers and then his assistant would pin them to the wall, while he was advising. And he made some of his most famous works, of course. And some of these works were monumental. And here's one example. And again, here is Matisse in his older years, can't get out of bed, using a wheelchair, and yet the scale of these works is astounding. Now, yes, these artists did have help. And I think that's also a key idea when we're speaking about physical challenges, for artists to try as best they can to get the help that they need. This is a piece by Matisse, which is an installation shown at the Museum of Modern Art. Originally, this was installed in a dining room, but again, you could see how modern it is, the idea of installation and also the monumental scale. And here Matisse is sketching for his famous chapel in France, in Vence, France. At the end of his life, he designed an entire chapel. Every detail, the stained glass window, the priest's robe, the furniture, the stations of the cross, every detail was designed by Matisse. And this is one of Matisse's crowning achievements. And I just like this one in particular. It shows the resurrection, which of course is a symbol of hope, right? We all go through dark times in our lives, and the resurrection is a symbol of hope. Here's Frida Kahlo. And Frida Kahlo did have polio as a child, but the injury that most impacted her life was at the age of 18. She was in a very serious bus accident, and a piece of metal rod went through her spine. And she spent months in bed. And throughout her life, she also had to wear a cast, which I can imagine how heavy these casts were, especially back then. Her father set her up. This is probably later on. I'm not sure what year this was taken, but her father set her up so she could paint from bed. And one of her favorite subjects was painting her own self-portrait. This is actually when Frida Kahlo discovered that she was actually an artist, before she had dabbled in art. Same thing with Matisse. He actually discovered he was an artist in his early years when he had an appendicitis operation and his mother gave him paints. And here's Frida Kahlo painting from bed, and there's the picture on the right of her family lineage. And her father was really instrumental in helping her as an artist. He was a photographer, and he encouraged her when she was recovering all those months in bed. So you can imagine how difficult this was for a young woman, 18 years old. But throughout her life, she had many, many surgeries. She had many trials and tribulations with her physical operations and pain and so on. And she painted all of the stories of her life in these self-portraits with an imaginative quality, but always painting her reality. So here's Frida Kahlo with her pet. Here's one that shows how Frida Kahlo, this was towards the end of her life, she also painted the trauma of the accident and the trauma of her pain. So she didn't shy away from difficult subjects. Now, some people might look at this and say, oh, this is depressing. I don't want to look at this. I don't particularly feel that way, because when I was a young student at School of Visual Arts and I had lost my brother, and my father was in an accident that left him severely disabled, when I looked at these paintings, I found a freedom in them because they gave me permission to tell my story through art. So there's, even though it's about pain and suffering, there's enormous power in these images. And here's Frida Kahlo in the flag. It says, "Tree of Hope remains strong." So on the right side, she's in her traditional Mexican dress. She looks healthy and whole. And what's going on the left side? It's post-surgery. She's in the hospital. And you see this cycle of day and night, and the landscape looks somewhat barren. But this really speaks to me, this image. This is just my own personal interpretation. When there's an injury, and you can remember yourself before the injury, and it's like a cycle that continues. That's what this reminds me of. You might have a different interpretation. This is Frida Kahlo's final painting, Viva la Vida, Long Live Life. And this is also an image of regeneration, right? It shows the watermelon at different stages and phases, but it ends on an optimistic note with the seeds, right? What are seeds? Seeds are about the future. Seeds are about hope. Seeds are about life-giving. So she ends really with a life-affirming painting. And our last artist before we hear from Matt is Chuck Close, who recently died in his 80s. This is Chuck Close before his injury. He's standing next to this monumental self-portrait, 1968. And Chuck Close was a successful artist. He had a family, everything was going well. He was known for painting these monumental faces that look realistic from far away. And when you get close up, you see that they're made from these little modules, and there's like a grid embedded into the image. So Chuck Close, one day, I think he just collapsed, and he had an aneurysm in his spine, and he lost complete mobility of most of his body. Now, when I heard Chuck's biography, he said he went back to painting because he had to support his family. He had a wife and a son, and maybe 2 kids, I'm not sure. But I thought that was really interesting. You know, he had a purpose that was larger than himself in addition to the art. So how does a person who's painting these monumental images, how do they continue? Now, he was fortunate because he had already established his career, and he could set his studio up in such a way that this mechanism rotated the canvas, and you could see his right hand has a brace that would help him move. And he did also have assistants helping him, and, you know, until the end of his life. Now, Chuck Close paints these paintings, and the irony of it, of faces, and the irony of it is that he had another disability where he had no face recognition whatsoever. So he said when he was in kindergarten, at the end of the year, he couldn't remember any child, because if he met you and you walked out of the room, he has no memory of what your face looks like. So that is really socially debilitating. So Chuck actually is painting so detailed these modules of color to create the face, and he said it would help him to remember what the person looked like. It's also interesting, as a child, obviously it's hard to make friends if you can't remember someone's face. So he was really smart. He became a magician when he was a little boy. So all the kids in the neighborhood wanted to come over to him because he was doing magic shows. So I thought that was really interesting also. This is the latest mosaic made in the mural, which I've yet to see, on 86th Street in Manhattan. And I would like to show you a YouTube video where we could hear Chuck Close in his own words, because he's quite articulate. This is a series that CBS did where they asked famous people to make a note to themselves when they were 14 years old, like as if they're talking to their 14-year-old self. So let's hear what he says.
This is a note to myself at age 14. I was in the 8th grade and was told not to even think about going to college. I couldn't add or subtract, never could memorize the multiplication tables, was advised against taking algebra, geometry, physics, chemistry. Since I was good with my hands, I was advised to aim for trade school, perhaps body and fender work. Find what you are capable of by using parameters that don't apply to you. I applied to a junior college in my hometown with open enrollment. Got in, embarked on a career in the visual arts. Virtually everything I've done is influenced by my learning disabilities. I think I was driven to paint portraits, to commit images of friends and family to memory. I have face blindness, and once a face is flattened out, I can remember it much better. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work. Every great idea I've ever had grew out of work itself. Sign on to a process and see where it takes you. You don't have to invent the wheel every day. Today you'll do what you did yesterday. Tomorrow you'll do what you did today. Eventually you will get somewhere. No one gets anywhere without help. Mentors, including your parents, can make you feel special even when you are failing in other areas. Everyone needs to feel special. My father died when I was 11, and that was a tragedy of my life. A horrible thing to happen when you're so young. Oddly enough, there was a gift in this tragedy. I learned very early in life that the absolute worst thing can happen to you, and you will get past it, and you will be happy again. Losing my father at a tender age was extremely important in being able to accept what happened to me later when I became a quadriplegic. If you're overwhelmed by the size of a problem, break it down into many bite-sized pieces. Quadriplegics don't envy the able-bodied, we envy paraplegics. We think they've got a much easier road to hoe. There's always someone worse off than you. No artist has more pleasure day in and day out from what he or she does
You're not available now.
than I do.
So now I would like to introduce our guest speaker today, Matt Raynor. As I said, Matt is a photographer, and this is one of his beautiful photographs. He captures the East End of Long Island and other locations now using drone photography. And I met Matt at Pechacucha, which is a special presentation at the Parish Art Museum. And Matt, would you like me to show the Pechacucha talk now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at this Pechacucha talk, it is a special format, but we're not going to get into that. You're not going to see Matt, you're going to see the images and hear his creative process.
The water has always served as my holy place, a place of peace and solitude, far from the anxieties of life. Regardless of how rigorous the work could get, life as a waterman was always an unabated source of calm for me. For adventure. I've always been a risk taker and thrill seeker. It was a coping mechanism for my own demons and character flaws, the likes of such we all face. But the adrenaline of fishing around the clock in a storm and the subsequent paycheck filled me with delight. It was an occupation that I loved, and it afforded me the freedom to travel. Exploring new lands and cultures was just as delightful as my sea excursions. In retrospect, all of it was a form of escapism. But why discover while you're running when you can pick the low-hanging fruits around you? Being young and careless, I didn't expect to grow old. And this seemed to expedite my efforts in exploring all of life's flavors and facets. I ran as fast as I could to see and do as much as I could, doing so before this self-imposed clock to demise hit zero. I traveled around the world, as much of it as I could, and the sea, willingly ignorant to this conundrum. I have very few regrets, as life is meant to be lived. In hindsight, my carelessness would register on that list. But at the time, the anticipation of the next adventure skewed any willingness for deep self-reflection. The peace and freedom of the open sea was something I had been searching for since I was a child. It was like being on a different planet. The rules of normal life need not apply. And as for being on a different planet, absolutely perfect. The space oddity could finally fully disconnect. The work was extremely strenuous, mentally and physically. One trip I worked 36 hours straight, completely sleep deprived. I went to my bunk to finally sleep, only to be restless and uncomfortable. When I closed my eyes, I kept seeing strange scenes of terror, like nuclear explosions and surgeons performing operations. Sleep deprivation is a real thing. On another occasion, I found myself as a greenhorn on a much larger boat, a boat capable of catching a very serious volume of fish. I was given the introductory task of stacking boxes, each weighing roughly 80 pounds with ice. On this particular trip, we happened to break the all-time 20-year record by loading 65,000 pounds of squid into the hold, all of which went into boxes stacked 6 high, way offshore in a slippery fish hold on a boat rocking in a gale. As time progressed and I made it past that fateful age of 27, life seemed to slow down a bit. The insanity of my early 20s was all but gone. My faded doom clock had faded away, but still, the bones were still there. I loved fishing and traveling and thrill seeking. In the winter of 2019, I really pushed it. I went offshore for 3 weeks to come in and work 3 weeks on the bay, catching scallops, then back offshore for another 3 weeks. When I came back in, I had really severe tendonitis. Anyway, to ease the pain, I would dive in here, Toad Point. There's a picture of Toad Point here somewhere. That's where I broke my neck. Yeah, I missed it. Okay. One morning I did several dives, and on the last one, I smacked my head. The next thing I know, I'm staring through frigid emerald blue water, completely paralyzed. Time slowed. I felt as if I was in a waiting room. My whole life presented itself from start to finish in its entirety. And I was happy. If this was where my clock resurfaced and hit zero, I was fine with it. I felt I had lived a full life, short but rich with adventure and exploration. I was even content with the many silly and stupid misadventures. My only regret was not being able to have a child and see them grow. I had a moment of complete acceptance, and then suddenly the lights went out. The next thing I woke up to was Jerome Lucani's face on the beach. He swam out and pulled me to shore. He told me my eyes were wide open, motionless, and my lips were blue. He did CPR. So much for my clock hitting zero. I'm back from the dead. I think God, the universe, Buddha, whatever you call it, has a sense of humor, because I'm definitely not running anymore. After my extraordinary spiritual experience on the beach, I spent 3 months in the hospital. Fortunately, I never recovered much. When I returned, I couldn't take care of myself whatsoever. I had to move back in with my mother. I couldn't move or feel 85% of my body. We all have our own personal hell. I've lived mine, and it's worrying every day if you're going to have someone help you get out of bed, use the toilet, get dressed, eat, pretty much everything. And Medicaid totally failed me in the beginning. They just never sent a caretaker. Got lost in Medicaid limbo land. I don't know. I felt helpless, as if my life was just a favor. This went on for months until there was a breaking point. I caught a horrendous UTI and had a fever of 106. During my time in the hospital, my mom tore a bicep, and when I came home, it was obvious that there was no one to take care of me. So at that point, I figured, what's going to happen? I'm going to be 29 in a nursing home. Was that like a life that you want to live? I don't know. So only 2 options presented themselves. Oh, this thing's over. Man, really messed up. Self-destruction, or do my best to live again, however difficult. Do it any way possible. And things turned around. My friend Bridget Leroy had a fundraiser to hire a caretaker. Eventually, I figured out how to get Medicaid to pay for one of my choosing. I slowly crawled out from my own personal hell, and my concerns shifted more from just surviving to what can I do with my life. I know full well what I can't, but what about the possibilities? With some clever innovation, I discovered that I could operate a drone and pick up an old hobby of photography. While this was difficult at first, I continued to get better at it. Next, I had to figure out how to use a computer, and eventually I got good at both, and with the computer kind of opened up like a whole world of things that I could do instead of just watching TV. which is no way to live. And just like that, by direction and purpose, get out and capture something beautiful and do whatever you can.
Here's your home page on your website. Do you want to talk about these photographs at all? Anything?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Just tell me where to click.
these first three were, from my life beforehand. It's just like a basket of little necks, and the plumeria flowers I took a picture of when I was in Thailand. I was in Chiang Mai, and they were growing all over the place, and they were really pretty. So I took a picture, and there it is. And the picture of the boats is Point Judith at Galilee, which is just a port. I think that the Block Island ferry leaves from there too.
Mm-hmm.
And then below that are some lightning whelk, like Squingieli. And then we have the Shinnecock Bay in April, where the water is really clear, beautiful. And over to the right of there is a really nice panorama of
I clicked
the end of
oh,
Meadow Lane. It's really, really clear. I mean, if you zoom in on it, it's like, I think it was like 25 or 30 picture, like the actual picture file, the TIFF file is huge. So like this doesn't even really do it justice. But you can zoom in on like each individual house and see all the details.
And did you take this with your drone recently?
Yeah. Probably like June or July.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about your process using this drone?
Yeah, actually, I've gotten more independent with it as time has gone on. I mean, usually I'll like, find a friend or a caretaker to bring me somewhere, and I'll fly the drone and see if I can get some good pictures. And
Now, when you are using the drone, can you see what the drone is taking pictures of? How does that work?
yeah, I use an iPad. I put the iPad on like a little lap board. It Velcros on there, and then there's the joystick underneath it, so I can see and operate it.
This is incredible, man. And I see these are small sizes on your website. Do you envision ever making these like really large scale, printing them out like gigantic?
I have 40 by 60 is the biggest that I've made.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Just because they're so expansive, I could just see them like really
yeah.
big, you know what I mean? But they're very,
somebody's got to pay for it too. So
yeah.
40 by 60, they want to pay for that. That's perfect.
Okay.
Does the drone come with a camera?
Yeah. It's like it's one of the best, it's a whatever brand, Mavic brand, it has the best camera on the market, besides the ones that, like, if you ever go to like a photography shoot and they have like these helicopters flying around with a camera attached, besides that, this is the best.
And then when you get back, do you look through all the photos? Does the drone automatically take like just pictures in sequence, and then you come back and you edit it?
Well, I mean, the drone, it has a bunch of different properties and different shoot modes. It's got aperture priority, manual, automatic, just like a regular camera. And then there's other options where you can change a white balance to auto, or change it to whatever you want it. And you can do AEB photos, which I usually do. I do like 3 to 5 pictures at different exposures, and then merge them later in post. And the picture of Southampton, that's why I was like so detailed, I suppose. Also, I think the lighting was like perfect because it was from behind. But
Which one? This one?
that one, yeah.
This one?
No, to the right there.
The Shinnecock?
Shinnecock Inlet East.
That's incredible.
Yeah. You can see the Hampton Lady out there. You can see it. If you go to the right a little bit, that's a little charter boat. They used to dock next to us.
Oh my gosh, that is just absolutely incredible, that
And
photo.
then, you could see all this. There wasn't that many people hanging out down at the inlet that day. So, I mean, that's kind of good for a photo.
Very cool.
It's a little crowded down there if you've ever been down there.
It's really incredible, Matt.
Yeah. And then there's, if you want to check out some of my before photos when I was fishing, just go to nautical photos.
Nautical photos up
Yeah,
here.
you just go to shop photos, nautical photography,
Oh my gosh.
and then
Matt, these are amazing. How
there's
do you
some.
see that color effect, like on the one on the right?
Yeah,
So interesting. It plays with the idea of solidity. Like the wave almost starts to look like a mountain, and it's like the way it approaches the boat, it just looks so odd. Like
well, the
what?
thing is, when I was on the boat, that wasn't the wave. That was just the top of the wave. The wave is like really long. It was like 16-foot swells, so like each wave 16 foot high, but like the lengthwise is they're really really long. 40, 50 feet. It's like going up a hill pretty much. And this wave happened to come at us at the stern. We were just kind of like we were in the right direction where part of the wave hit this side of the boat and reared up, and you could get kind of like a perspective of what you're dealing with, because if you take pictures of rough seas, it's like taking pictures of the mountains. It just like when you look at them later,
Mhm.
doesn't you're like, it didn't look like that, but something like this, it works.
That's incredible, Matt. That is absolutely incredible.
I've actually found a bunch more since, which is cool.
Wow. And this port side one is beautiful too. And I love the way you have that rope going across.
Yeah, that's actually a stay wire for the outriggers on the fishing boat. Keeps the boat stabilized.
It's really good.
But it also kind of serves to like to divide the photo in half. It's almost in quarters here. You get the dark over here and then the beautiful sun over here. Super dramatic.
And in terms of your photography now, what do you have a vision for your photographs in terms of like I'd love to see him in a museum, or I'd love to see him like, do you have any vision for it, or are you just kind of going
Honestly, I this summer I did like 6 art fairs outside, outdoor art fairs in Southampton and West Hampton, and I got to tell you, it was pretty difficult physically to do it because I can't sweat, and when it's like 98 degrees, I just get a fever.
Ah,
So like, I didn't realize that was going to happen when I first started doing it. So I had to figure out the logistics, like if I could park the van a certain space and then go cool off, and then I have to find somebody to stay in the booth, and then but it was still a chance to put your art in front of people. But from here on, I have like another art fair, 9th, 10th, and 11th, 2 different places. And
where
then
is that?
the 9th, it's at the Ecological Cultural Initiative Center in Hampton Bays. It's like it's like a nunnery actually.
Oh, wow.
And then I'm out at the Great Lawn the next day,
That's amazing.
West Hampton. Yeah,
That's
but
that's amazing. That's a lot of work regardless. Those fairs are a lot of work. So
yeah, they are. It's really hard for me to get there like when I should be, because nobody buys art when it's 98 degrees. Like, you know what I mean? If I get there late, I'm not gonna make any money, and it's hard because I gotta get somebody here to get me up, do all the stuff that a quadriplegic needs done, get
Mhm.
dressed, and then have somebody drive me there, somebody stay with me, somebody handle everything, and then back home, and then in bed,
Mm-hmm.
So the whole thing is it's quite the production, but it was nice to be out finally after COVID.
Matt,
Um,
can I give you a hint about staying cool? We learned this when we were traveling. If you put a whole bunch of ice cubes in a plastic bag with a little towel around it, it stays cold for a long time. Then you put it on your neck and other pulse points. It
I
helps.
did that after the
Okay.
first show. Like I filled a huge cooler with ice, and then because I can't feel anything below my collarbone, I just put ice packs everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not the best. I didn't get an ice burn or anything, but
Hmm.
what I do really want to do is I don't have an example on the website but I want to do like a combination of photography and I guess you wouldn't say it's sculpture so much, but it's like a combination of photography with metalworking, because I used to work on the boats, and a lot of my friends are welders. So I have one piece where I superimposed Tiana and Buoy 8, and then I had my friend Scott um, take a blowtorch to it, or not, or a plasma torch actually, because you can use a plasma torch without like lighting the paint on fire,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just much more meaningful for me than just a picture, because pictures seem cheap and easy for me to do, especially because I can replicate them. But a piece like that, it has meaning behind it, and
Mm-hmm.
there's depth to it.
Right. So you want to push it a little further into a physical object, like
Yeah.
that you
And
can
then
walk
when I
right
sell them, each one is original too,
Mm-hmm.
instead of multiple prints.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, these photos are amazing. I mean, to you, it looks easy, but to everybody else, it doesn't. I mean, it's not just the photo, but also the way you composed it. And they're really elegant, in my opinion.
yeah.
So, does anybody have any questions for Matt or anything else?
So there was a picture that looked to me like a sea of flowers. I don't know which one it is, and I don't have
Oh, maybe you're talking about the boardwalk one.
I just wanted to ask what it was, though.
It's a boardwalk from above, and
Right.
like in the winter, when the winter sun is kind of like really low in the sky all year, it catches the shadows different, and I got that really cool picture. You like can't really tell what it is. It almost looks like
Yeah.
stars or something.
I thought it was beautiful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that picture. It's one of my favorites. That was like one of the first photos where I was like, oh, I can actually take pictures. That's cool. Yeah, maybe I can do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
I have it actually have it in the background of my cell phone. I tried to go back there and recreate it later, and I couldn't do it
Mm-hmm.
because I guess you can't do it in the summer. It's the time of year, the shadows.
Anybody else have a question for Matt?
Do you have another one?
Good.
Because we're always watching this. There's a show called, wait, what's that called again, Mark? The Best Friends Forever. But anyway, have you thought of getting an animal helper?
It has been talked of many times, like the little monkeys. You get like little
Monkeys,
monkeys.
yeah, monkeys or
It'd be
whatever.
nice. Yeah, you can get a monkey actually. They train monkeys to help people. They're like, and they do stuff for you.
That's cool.
I talked about it,
Mm,
but I'm not gonna actually get a monkey.
it's a process, right?
Yeah.
So let's see. Natalie says, your photos are incredible and stunning. I love how creative pursuit has brought purpose to your life. Art is amazing like that. Mhm.
It's true.
It's true. Anybody else? Any questions about Matt's artistic process?
I
What
think it's
inspires
wonderful.
him?
I think his work is wonderful.
Hmm.
Thanks. Thanks.
Well, I don't usually, Christmas is coming, the holidays
Yeah,
are
right.
coming. And no, seriously, those artworks are amazing, Matt. Anybody else? Any questions about any of the artists we spoke about, or anything else? Is there anyone on here? Maybe there's somebody. Oh, can the photos be purchased online? That's Helen Harris said. Can you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
that? How does that
Yes.
work? How does that work?
On my website, it's just a Shopify store.
And
you
then
know,
you deliver, what do they get mailed to the person?
It
How-
depends what you buy. If you buy like a matted print, I make it at my house and then I'll ship it to you. But the aluminum prints, they just, the manufacturer will have them delivered to your house.
Mhm.
Just go straight to your house.
That's really good. Okay, I'll put your website in the chat.
Yeah. And I really would like to get going on that. I want to do a series of 6 pieces like the one I was describing earlier with the plasma torch, but I just haven't been able to get around to do it. And also, I'm not really sure on how to like get publicity to do it. If I'm going to spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 on material and labor to make this, like, is it worth it? I don't know.
Anyone out there who's good at publicity? Who has any tips for artists in general?
I think I should just make it and see what happens. I want to do it anyway.
Right. Well, that's one way, build it, what they say, build it and they will come. And then, of course, social media is key nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Anybody specifically, any tips on promoting? How about Pearl? Pearl just took a
Right.
class
You
in
know what
promotion.
my
and
problem is?
Yeah.
I'm oversaturated.
Yeah.
My audience has already bought. Everyone's already bought something. That's why I was doing the art fairs, because I was trying to broaden the audience.
Mhm. Pearl, did you have any?
Hi. I love your photography. It's just incredible. Those pictures from the boat, so that wave that rose up. I just recently did a painting that had some of that feeling of the wave rising. It's so interesting to see the force of water, and I just really loved seeing that. You have
Thanks.
several of those photographs, just incredible.
Thanks.
And it's your presentation, your story, you're quite an inspiration. I just really, and you'll figure it out with the plasma work that, I don't know, have you tried getting a gallery? I mean, I would think, your work is so consistently good that
I guess I'd have to mark my prices up twice as much for the gallery. That's why I've never done it.
Mhm.
well, it's not a bad thing if you double your price from a gallery. It just
True.
means you're more valuable, and they'll do a lot of work for you in terms of selling and getting you out there.
Sell some of my stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and you should be open to that.
Yeah. You really need to see the work in person to appreciate it.
Mhm.
I've noticed that, I could send 1,000 people to my website and it's just a picture on a screen. But when people walk into my art booth, they're like, whoa, I can actually see what's going on here,
Mhm. Yeah, that
But
fine
I
detail.
should try the gallery too. I think after this next art show, not this weekend, but next weekend, yeah, maybe I'll try that.
Mhm.
I'll go for it.
Why, I'm sure you have lots of connections locally in East Hampton,
Well,
Southampton
he
area.
lived in Hampton Bays, but nonetheless,
Yeah, it's not far. I mean, to try to utilize those connections to get you an introduction into especially local galleries,
Yeah, I used to keep.
landscape
I did.
painting has, not, excuse me, landscape photography, just like landscape painting, there is a local appeal to these things, so that might be a place to start.
Yeah, I had since I have been injured, every winter I used to have like a exhibition at the not the Southampton Arts Center, but Southampton Cultural Center
Mhm.
for a couple months. And they don't take a commission, but you have to bring your own audience,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to, I need to grow my audience at this point.
Right,
Well,
right, right.
This is one way to do it, Matt.
Yeah.
This,
So
this recording will be posted on YouTube. You could also post it on your website if you like. And of course, look, it's always when I get suggestions, it's the suggestion can sound good, but then it's like, oh, wait, but now I actually have to do it. That's a whole different story. So we don't want you to get overwhelmed or anything.
Mhm.
So Rosemary says, you are an inspiration. I have a chronic illness and it's hard to motivate. You are a great role model. And Rosemary is on Zoom here. And can I pin, because I like your painting, Rosemary. Can we show everybody? Because I think it's actually it relates to this topic. Can you put your camera so we could see your painting? So Rosemary is one of my close friends. I am a fan. But I think this is a really good example where Rosemary has to spend time at home. So she's taking this painting class online where they give videos and specific classes and directions. So she's accessing expertise and she's painting in this abstract expressionist style, which is remarkable. So that's actually, in a way, it's an adaptation using technology, right?
Yeah. It's changed my life.
Mhm.
And Teresa says, I call it drive-by photography. You've inspired me to take a look into drone photography. Anybody else? Anyone want to share any ways that you've used adaptations in your own work? Okay, I don't know why it's staying on Rosemary. Okay.
I
Oh,
can talk about that.
yeah, Pearl, go ahead.
So I have arthritis, and thank God it's not bad, but over time I've had to figure out what art supplies will work for my hands so I don't stress them out. And I used to draw a lot, but drawing really can be stressful, especially if you're putting pressure on pencils and things, pushing into paper, just putting a lot of pressure on you. And so it has really changed my art a lot in that I've switched more to using water media and moving in more of a flow form that just makes it easier on my body as a whole. But because of that, I've really moved into areas that I would not have moved into in terms of my work. And so sometimes you have to go with the flow. Matt, boy, you really did go with the flow in terms of, maintaining your love of photography and getting out there. I used to work at the Queens Museum of Art, where I ran a program called Art Access. It's still going on. And I had to develop lots of different ways that kids with physical disabilities could do art. And it was interesting because I had to do that at the same time when my arthritis was bad, especially in my hands. And so having that arthritis and feeling really how difficult it is to hold something that's heavy, and what kind of actions can I use for especially helping kids with cerebral palsy do art, was really enlightening. Using myself to just figure out, like I said, the weight. And we came up with lots of really interesting found object tools that made making art with children a lot easier. We took a the styrofoam that they use to make a wreath, you stick all kinds of stuff in and wrap it. And we wound up using those styrofoams, we'd shove markers into them so that kids, instead of using just their hands, were now using their whole body. They were leaning on it and they could use their body to draw and move. And that was just one of many, many inventions that we made for these kids. And it was just really an amazing thing. So just taking my own issues and understanding, how to make things so that they would be light, which was like really key, and flexible. So that's it. That's my story.
Excellent. And Pearl, I'm going to put a plug in for Pearl's painting behind her. She is an
No,
amazing.
no, that's not mine. That's my husband's.
Oh, he's getting good, Pearl. You got competition. Pearl and her husband, they're both
Yeah.
amazing painters.
Wait, I got a new one. Wait, I'll show
All
it
right,
to you. I have a
move
new
on
one
to
right
the
here.
next person.
Okay. If you go to my website, Pearl Rose and Golden, you'll find my new painting, especially Matt, that has the new painting. It's on the front of my website. It's called The Wave Rises. And you'll see what I mean about the connection to those photos that you were showing. Okay, so this is my new little, stop. This is my new little painting.
Type the website here
Yep.
when you get a chance.
Yeah, Pearl, type it in the chat before we end.
Oh, okay. So this is just a new little one. I'm out in Seattle now, and this is one of the streets that I walk up and down, and this is on gouache. So in terms of like the flowy feeling, you can see it in this little piece.
Beautiful, Pearl.
So yeah, it's fun. We're giving Bob a plug. There's Bob's painting.
And Bob started later in life, so it's never too late to start painting.
Oh yeah.
And let's see, so is there anyone else? We have about 2 minutes. Matt, would you like any closing remarks, or anyone dying to say anything?
I just wanted to say, thank you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this for me. And thanks for tagging along with my story, appreciate it.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and your art. And of course, I just want to say this to make it very, very clear. I'm sure it's already clear. But when we're celebrating Matt's art and the art of all of these artists, we're really celebrating the art itself in its own right. And for the sake of this topic, weaving in how physical challenges can actually promote creativity. But the art in and of itself stands out, and I think that's pretty clear. So with that, thank you, Matt. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Enjoy this beautiful day, and be well, and use all of this good stuff for positive, for inspiration. Okay.
Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Joyce.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everybody. On the Zoom
Thank you, guys.
Take
Bye.
care.
Hope to see everyone somewhere out there on the East End.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Nice to see you, Matt. Bye.